Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. Speaking of power, we have a powerful show for you again this week. We start out talking with a high school teacher from Minnesota. Then we dive into hearing about a No Kid Hungry campaign and why it's important. Following that segment, we hear about vaccines and the scientific research that proves they're effective. And we close the show talking about the importance of your story with the Little Lobbyists, one of my favorite organizations on the planet. We're going to jump right in with our first guest. All eyes have been on Minnesota and the human rights abuses that have been happening in the name of immigration enforcement, the lives lost, the disruption to communities, the disruption to school, the schools that have having to close down. It has been chaos put forward by the Trump administration and their policies. Can you talk a little bit about your experience of working and teaching in a school in this moment? What type of disruptions are you seeing?
Where to begin? I think it has been overarching. I mean, it started earlier this year, obviously, with the renewed aggression from the Trump administration. Starting in August, September, we started talking with some of our immigrant kids about their interviews with ICE, and I was writing letters, character witnesses for some of the kids that had to go to the detention center or to have an interview about their asylum case. Fast forward to now, when Operation Metro Surge began in early January, it has been nonstop. Every single day, we have students who find out their family members have been detained, and you hear people crying in the hallway. Or we have a huge room in our media center that's just been reallocated to food. We have so many community members taking donations, going grocery shopping for families who are in hiding, essentially. And the biggest disruption has been on our attendance. Right now, about 300 of our students from our high school have chosen to do the start of second semester online, and that's about 1/4 of our total student enrollment. We have an enrollment around 1,130 right now. So yeah, even more than 1/4 of the student body has chosen classes online. So those students do not want to be learning online. They remember COVID. I teach mostly 10th graders, and they know that it wasn't great to be online, but that's the choice they really had to make to keep their families safe.
It's really hard. I'm so sorry that you and everyone are dealing with this. What can parents and teachers do to respond?
Well, definitely we've seen teachers and school staff, social workers, and community members step up in so many ways. Currently, we have a group of community members and parents who come and patrol the school, and who are outside at dismissal and arrival times, patrolling even at basketball games to make sure kids can get to and from their cars safely. We have people at bus stops making sure the bus stops are safe. We have tons of parents and community members raising money and doing donations. And then we have a huge crew that goes out on patrol as well to try to make sure the neighborhood itself is safe from ICE. So people have really stepped up. Obviously, teachers are in it every single day, but the community has stepped up completely as well.
And can you share a little bit about the whistles for people who aren't in Minnesota?
For sure. Yeah, they've definitely become a sign of the resistance, I would say. A lot of people in the news I've noticed have been calling people with whistles protesters, but I think that's a really miscategorization of the whistle. It's mostly as a neighbor and being a legal observer. Essentially, the whistle around your neck will be a sign to the rest of the people in the neighborhood that ICE is present, or we're using them now for when ICE is out of their vehicles. It's just a way to warn people that this vehicle that's on the block is ICE and that they should either stay inside or just be aware that this is happening in their neighborhood. But we have had success while people either see ICE and they lay on their horns or they blow their whistles. A lot of times it forces the ICE vehicles to move on as well and leave the vulnerable neighborhoods alone.
And for listeners, there's a million reasons why this is important. A million. I'll just share a couple of stories. Of course, we've all seen the headlines of people who were murdered by ICE. And then we had the administration, despite what we all saw on multiple videos, not tell the truth about what had happened. So there's real concern for public safety. We've heard concern from public safety by mayors and by even the governor of Minnesota. We've seen the loss of lives. We've also seen a lot of kids be unfairly taken up by ICE. We heard a story of a young person who was walking home from like a little local store with a pack of snacks. And ICE said to this kid, "Where are your papers?" And the kid said, "What papers?" And then the kid said, "Can I go home?" And ICE said no. And I just want to bring us into the frame of what exactly we're talking about here. No child, no kid, no teenager is walking around with papers. Not only would we not want them walking around with their birth certificate or passport or any kind of paper that, I know my kids, they might immediately lose as teenagers. Those are important documents. But that's just not what we're doing in the United States of America. And the other thing that we haven't until now done is this rampant just violation of the US Constitution over and over and over again, and targeting kids. I mean, awful. And we all saw the story, of course, of little 5-year-old Liam, who is used as, quote, bait, end quote, in his own house. And he has been released from detention. And you know why? He was detained illegally, Liam and his family. So we're seeing the unfair treatment of immigrant families. We're also seeing the actual running over of the US Constitution. We're seeing a lot of violations of human rights. We're seeing people in ICE who don't have badge numbers, who are wearing masks, who don't have training, but are just very armed. And we're seeing the result of that again in the loss of life. So when we're talking about whistles and people having whistles in the community when ICE is out of their cars, it's about letting people know that it's important to pay increased attention to your settings around you, because there's just this awful history this year of what's been happening under the Trump administration. What did I leave out, Kristen?
Yeah, you could tell a million stories exactly like that. I just had a student, sorry, school bell. I just had a student come in late to class last week, and the look on his face was horrible. He had been driving to work, or sorry, to driving to school, and had been pulled over by ICE. And he said, I can't stay in class. I have to go to the office, which is totally understandable. So he went to the office to talk to some counselors. There are numerous students, some Latino students, but even some of our white students have been pulled over by ICE. And just the trauma of seeing an armed officer at your car window, regardless of your citizenship status. Like you mentioned, I had a student drop his birth certificate in my classroom the other day. He left it under the desk, and I had to go take it to him. And he was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I left the fear of what would happen if you don't have your documents and things like that." So it's just been tragedy after tragedy on the micro level, all the way to the macro level, to where one of my soccer players last week, her mother was detained. We spent all day worried about her and her mom, and luckily then her mom was released, but it still comes with all the fear, all the questions of where is this person and why are they now being released? So it's been just a very stressful time for our students and for our families.
And it's impossible to focus and learn in school with this going on. You may either be directly impacted yourself, or you may have your best friend's seat be empty the next day. I mean, there's no person in America, and especially in Minnesota, who's not impacted in some way or another by this negatively. And listeners, audience, these tactics, these human rights abuses in the name of immigration enforcement, are being funded $75 billion, just B with a billion, by cuts to healthcare, to SNAP, to childcare, to programs that voters actually do prioritize time and time again across the political spectrum. Those programs are being cut in order to fund these human rights abuses. I just can't even believe that's where we are in our country right now. Fortunately, we do have still a democracy. We still can vote. We still should vote. We should vote for every office who's on the ballot, from city council to state to federal. And those elections are starting to happen for 2026. So everybody should check to double, triple check that they're still registered to vote. Do you have advice about what else people can do to help?
Right now in Minnesota specifically, the donations are going a long way and the mutual aid efforts are extreme. I mean, I know that our government officials have been the public ones on the news, our governor, our mayor, but I would say it's the people on the ground that are really the ones supporting the communities. So if you can find a direct donation to help people on the ground, it really goes a long way. And I know our schools are taking donations as well here in Columbia Heights, where Liam Ramos was detained. And we still have currently at least one student from our high school who is detained at the Dilley Detention Center in Texas. But so many families who have had parents or loved ones detained as well. We also, I would agree with you, voting is super important. Calling your representatives and your senators to let them know to not fund ICE, because at this point, ICE is acting outside of the law, like you said, and against the Constitution. So as a social studies teacher, definitely I would tell you voting is important, and going to the meetings as well. I was even at a park board meeting the other night where they were, again, talking about ICE in parks. So every level of government is important in this moment.
Yeah, 100%. As a social studies teacher, as a world history teacher, how important is this moment for us to all still stand up with one another?
And we talk about it all the time in world history, how people have resisted regimes and how people have resisted oppression throughout all of world history. But I really never imagined it in this scale right here in our streets. But definitely it's extremely important that we remember our amendments in the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the First Amendment, and we talk about that a lot in class. And I know my students have been drawing a lot of connections between what we study in world history and what's happening right now in our neighborhoods.
And it's so important that we don't repeat the awful parts of history. We don't have to. We can do better. We know we can do better. And so I agree with you. Call your members of Congress. Tell them we want health care, child care, SNAP. We want the programs that lift our families, that allow people to go to work, that allow us to contribute to our communities. We don't want funding for ICE, for human rights abuses, for terrifying immigrants, for really tearing families apart. We know we need a comprehensive, compassionate, and secure immigration plan, but we don't need this. And what this is cruelty and just absolutely damaging cuts to the programs that lift us all. Where do you get hope from?
That's a great question. Right now, when it's negative degrees here in Minneapolis and cold out there and a lot of ice in many forms, it is really difficult. I would say just seeing the community come together is extremely hopeful. I think when people work together, there is community built, and I've met more neighbors and school community members in the last few weeks than I ever have before. I also would say the kids always bring a spot of hope and enlightenment, and they have really great ideas. They're recognizing the propaganda happening in real time. They are understanding this on a very deep level, and so they always are able to bring me some sort of hope that things are better in the future for sure.
I love that. Kids are our future leaders. I'm really just so beyond sad that they're having to go through this. And I agree that it's hopeful that we can have better leaders tomorrow, which brings us back to voting again. You know, I'm obsessed with that. It's 2026. We have the midterm elections, and we've seen where you are in Minnesota, the importance of city mayors, as you said, of park boards, also of the governor. So we also need people to, again, vote at all those different levels. So when you get your ballot, make sure that in both the primary and the general that you fill out the front and the back of the ballot. So races at the federal level and races at the local level all need your vote. Thank you so much for being on. Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for sharing with us what's happening, where you are. And thank you for keeping the hope going and keeping building those future leaders of tomorrow. So thank you.
Thank you. Ice out.
Next guest, talking about the No Kid Hungry campaign and why it's still important right now.
We're ready.
Okay. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have a superstar, superhero, superhuman guest joining us today, bringing us hope, talking about change. We have Anne Filipic, who has led consequential, civic, philanthropic, and political efforts that have helped transform the nation over the past several decades. She served most recently as assistant to the President of the United States of America, and she has also served as the Chief Program Officer at the Obama Foundation, and so much more. I have a really long bio, but I want to bring us Anne. So welcome, Anne.
Hey, Kristen. Not any more of a superhero than you or any of the moms listening, but it's great to be here with you today.
Well, I'm so excited. So, first, let's start out with some of the basic questions, which is, does democracy allow people to be engaged and make proactive, positive change? Now, I ask this because you have served with and under some stellar Democratic leadership. And right now, we have some leadership that, shall we say, is giving me the need to eat a bottle of Tums every day when I read the headlines. So, at our best, does democratic participation in public policy make a difference?
Absolutely. And I will tell you, actually, the reason I got first into electoral campaigns, but then into government and nonprofit work was because when I was in college, I knew I wanted to make a difference in the world, but I didn't know the best path to do that. And I realized that policy has a profound impact on people's lives, and that for better or worse, politics has a really profound impact on policy. And you mentioned I work for Barack Obama. What really brought me to his campaign in early 2007 was that vision of a belief that that we all have a role to play. Is famous lines of one voice can change a room, one room can change a community, one community can change a state, and one state can change the world. That vision for the power that we all hold in making a difference is what really inspired me to get involved. And I think time and time again, we've seen that to be true.
Yes, and including right now. So, right now, you are still in the game, still in the action, still working to make our nation better and a place where everyone can thrive with Share Our Strength. You all, it's an organization, Share Our Strength. Can you share us a little bit about the Share Our Strength effort?
Yeah, absolutely. So, folks may not have heard of the name Share Our Strength, but you may have heard of the major campaign that we run, which is the No Kid Hungry campaign. And that I think gives a clue of what our work is all about, which is about ending childhood hunger in America and ultimately abroad as well. And the name Share Our Strength really comes from the vision of how it was founded 40 years ago, which is the belief, actually goes back to your first question, Kristen, that we all have a role to play, that when we think about the pressing challenges of our time, that we all, whether you're an activist, an organizer, a CEO of a corporation, an artist, a chef, an everyday person just wanting to get involved, that we all have a role to play. We all can share our strengths towards this effort. And so we're focused on the very pressing issue we face in this country, that 1 in 5 kids currently in America faces food insecurity. That's nearly 14 million kids. And so we're working with state agencies, with local community organizations, with school districts, and individual schools to really reach kids where they are and make sure they have access to the federal nutrition programs that can help make sure they have full bellies and ultimately have the chance to reach their full potential and to thrive.
A, I love this. B, I love this. C, D, E, F, G, all the way through Z, I love this. And we're in the weirdest moment in history where programs like SNAP, which are also sometimes known as food stamps, which Republican analysis have found bring a return on investment for every $1 in by taxpayers, brings back $1.79 to our economy because those funds are spent immediately. Those programs, those programs, with the background of 1 in 5 kids facing food insecurity, have been turned into political footballs, have been held hostage by the Trump administration, who have stopped certain areas from being able to get access to SNAP and turned it on and off. And that is unprecedented. Food programs like SNAP have traditionally, throughout our nation's history, always been bipartisan because usually we all agree that we're all doing better when we're all doing better in terms of having access to food. It allows people to go to school, go to work, be productive. Hello, how can you be productive when you don't have access to food? It allows people to contribute to their communities. But yet, right now, we're in the oddly historic, tragically historic moment where programs like SNAP are being used as political footballs by the Trump administration. What is going on? How are they even doing this? Please make this make sense, Anne.
Oh, I don't know if I can make it make sense, Kristen, but I can share a little bit more about what we're seeing and why it is, I think, a true crisis, as you're naming. So yes, SNAP is the most effective program that we have, the most effective anti-hunger program that we have. 42 million Americans across the country rely on it. And I think many of your listeners are familiar with what happened in the fall, which you referenced with the government shutdown. For the first time in the history of this program, funds did not go out to families as expected and intended. We got through that with some real harm done, to be clear, but we got through it. The government reopened and that program is running again. But it's important to note that the crisis is not over. And a large part of that is because of legislation that was passed last summer and signed by President Trump on the 4th of July, I would say, ironically, that slashes this program by 20%. And so what we're expecting is that in the coming years, probably around 4 million people, many of them children, will lose access to these benefits. And Kristen, I'd love to share with you a story of a mom named Daisy in Louisiana that, to me, sort of it's easy to kind of get lost in these big numbers. And to me, the story of Daisy is like kind of what this is all about. She's a single mom raising 2 awesome kids. She works a full-time job. On top of that, works side jobs, including making custom crafts to sell, all to really try to make ends meet for her family. And even with working those multiple jobs, with the rising cost of groceries and everything else that she has to cover to raise her kids, they're having a hard time making ends meet. And so she went ahead and signed up for SNAP. And what is SNAP giving that family? It's allowing her daughter the chance to have fresh strawberries. It's allowing her son the chance to have his daily protein shake. And it's allowing them as a family the chance to go once a year, take a day trip, drive to the Gulf Coast to visit the beach and have one day there, and to remember that life is about more than getting by. So that's what SNAP is allowing for that family with a mom that's working multiple jobs. And to me, I think about, doesn't every one of our kids in this country deserve the chance to bite into a ripe strawberry and have the simple joy that comes with that? So to me, that's so much about what this program represents. Certainly it's about making ends meet, but it's about really giving our kids, all of our kids in this country, the chance to really thrive, find those simple joys and meet their full potential.
So we love SNAP. What can people do right now to help protect SNAP, given that it is under assault by the Trump administration?
So I think the most important thing that folks can do, and they can visit our website, nokidhungry.org, to participate in this, but is to reach out to your elected officials and make sure that they know how you feel about SNAP, that the program needs to be protected. And you can specifically explain to them that we think that the specific legislation that I was just referencing in HR 1, that should be delayed because and ultimately repealed, but we will take a delay to start. And because I think what's happening now is that there's a lot happening in the country and in the world. You don't need me to mention that. But I think that, frankly, a lot of elected officials think that people don't really care about SNAP, don't really care about these programs, or don't know or won't engage to make their voices heard. And so I think ultimately we need to make sure that they are hearing from people, just as they heard during the government shutdown. We saw really overwhelming support and many people stand up and make their voices heard. But the crisis isn't over. And so we need folks to reach out to your elected officials, your members of Congress, your senators, and make sure they know that we're watching, and we need them to change the trajectory and to ultimately strengthen these programs, not attack them.
100%. And one thing that's really important for everybody to know is that in that big, horrible, awful, ridiculous bill, where there was a 20% reduction in SNAP set, there was also a reduction in Medicare, and there was also a reduction in Medicaid. And you know what? Those reductions were made in order to pay for more than $75 billion in funding going directly to human rights abuses in the name of immigration enforcement. In other words, our SNAP for 42 million people was undercut to pay for human rights abuses in the name of immigration enforcement. We absolutely need a strong, secure, and compassionate immigration policy. What we don't need is cuts to SNAP or healthcare, and we also don't need the cruelty that we're all seeing in the headlines. So I would just add to what you heard, feel free to call your member of Congress and say, fund SNAP and healthcare, not cruelty with ICE. And I think that's really important because right now we're also looking to claw back a lot of those funds that went out in the big, bad, horrible bill of doom directly to human rights abuses and put them back in the programs that actually voters support. And this is something that's really important. When you talk with Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Libertarians, on the whole, they all support programs like SNAP and healthcare. And so the members of Congress in the Trump administration are out of step with their own Republican constituents. And by members of Congress, I want to say Democrats have been supporting SNAP. Democrats have been supporting healthcare. Democrats have been doing the right thing. So we want to thank our Democrats, tell them to keep fighting for us, and tell the Republicans to change their mind. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. No kid hungry is a phrase that I haven't met many people that disagree with that on the surface, right? And I think right now we are looking for, I think we're all looking for unifying issues. And this is one absolutely that people can get behind. The problem is that even if folks say they support that a lot of our elected officials are not living that in practice and are not voting in ways that support that. And so again, I think to me it is about they need to hear from us. They need to know that we are paying attention, that we care, and that we will bring that to the voting booths as well as we go forward. And I do think there is great power in that. And I think that as this starts to be, as we live into these changes that have come with SNAP, I think more and more people are gonna be standing up and making their voices heard. And I think those that voted for that bill are gonna recognize it was a mistake.
Yeah, it's definitely a mistake. We only have about a minute left. What is bringing you hope? You've seen a lot of things. You've made a lot of good things happen in public policy. What's bringing you hope right now in this time of ridiculous?
Just a few weeks ago in Washington, D.C., we convened a summer nutrition summit where we brought together over 500 leaders from, I think it was 47 states, so not quite 50, but in multiple territories and multiple tribal nations. And these are folks that are working together, whether it's state agency leadership or school officials who are coming together to deliver meals and essentially SNAP benefits to kids over the summer. And the level of determination, the focus, the interest in sharing best practices at a time that these folks are facing unprecedented challenge brought me a lot of hope. And I thought if they're coming with this level of determination, we better have their backs and we better approach it in that same way. So I think it can feel like our leaders are failing us. It can feel like nobody cares about what's happening in communities, but I have seen up close just a few weeks ago, the number of people that are fighting for our kids and fighting for our country. And that brings me a great dose of inspiration.
That brings me hope too. Thank you, Anne Filipic with Share Our Strength, talking about the No Kid Hungry campaign. You can get involved. Just go to Share Our Strength. Thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you, Kristen.
Next up, vaccines. Yes, science proves they're effective. It's an important segment. I secretly have on, look at this, Seahawks. I was debating if I should change, but I was like, I like the Seahawks. I'm pretty excited. I'm putting lipstick on. Didn't do that yet. Okay.
Harry Weisbrand with
yeah, he's with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Eric.
Hey,
Hi,
how you
Troy.
doing? I'm going to admit him right now.
Hi, Kristen.
How do you feel about my Seahawks gear? Should I just go all Seahawks?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a hat too that I've been wearing all day, but which you could probably tell from my hair. And I was like, that might be a little much to have a hat. And what do y'all think? Am I going to get voted off the island for wearing a Seahawks shirt?
I don't think so.
No, fandom is acceptable the week of the Super Bowl.
Okay.
Amen.
I'm pretty excited that they're in the Super Bowl, by the way. I am look, this is what I've been wearing on all my Zooms today. The whole outfit. But I won't do that.
The big foam finger.
I have two. They're outside my gate. There's a little pendant that's Seahawks, and then my dog has a little hole where she can look out of our gate and look at other people. walking by because she gets curious. And so we have like a little like headband that looks like it's on the dog. I'll send you a picture. And it has the little foam fingers on top of the headband that match the Seahawks blue of the pendant. So my dad played college football and my husband's dad played college football. So we're like football family.
All right.
Makes sense.
Did not let son play football, in case you're wondering.
Are you based in Seattle, or are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. Seattle or Minneapolis.
Yeah.
That makes a little more sense that you're a Seahawks fan and not a Vikings fan.
Yes. All right. Are we ready?
I'm ready on this end, audio wise.
Hi, Harry. Hi, Troy.
Hey, Kristen.
Hi,
I'm ready on this end.
Brad.
Hello.
Yep, we have a meeting coming up. Apologies for not making it clear that Troy is taking over and for the miscue. Troy, great to see you here. I'm going to let you guys get started.
Okay, great. Thanks to see you, Harry. All right. Angela, can you pronounce your name real quick?
Yeah, it's Angela Ulrich.
Okay. You ready, everyone?
Rolling.
Okay. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by a guest who you are going to love, extra love hearing from, Dr. Angela Ulrich. She's a researcher at the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy. Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Right now, ridiculously, vaccines are under attack by the Trump administration. It is complicated, it is weird, and I have a lot of questions. Study after studies shows that vaccines save lives. I'm going to say it again. Study after study show that vaccines save lives. And so we have an absolutely spectacular expert with us today to talk about vaccines and to talk about some specific vaccines as well. So first of all, do vaccines save lives, and why are vaccines important? I can't believe we have to ask this question in 2026, but here we are.
Yeah, I think it's a confusing time for a lot of people. We keep seeing that the information coming out of HHS is diverging from what the evidence seems to tell us, and we're seeing decisions that seem not to be based on the evidence, but are really driven by politics and ideology. And at the University of Minnesota, we have a research project called the Vaccine Integrity Project. And our goal is really to safeguard access to vaccines, to be able to share science-based evidence, and to share with the public, with public health experts, with physicians and others, what we know about vaccines, and to alert folks if there is any additional new information that they need to be aware of, to kind of give context to what's happening in the changing vaccine landscape.
And you're doing that because vaccines save lives. I wanted to get back to that part too. Like, how are vaccines helpful?
Yeah, vaccines are one of the top public health interventions of all time, and they do save lives. And we know that they prevent infectious disease and death. They reduce morbidity and mortality, and really are one of the most powerful tools that we have to be able to do that.
And I always like to bring up that vaccines don't also help the health and save lives of people who get the vaccine. It also helps to save lives in the community, because sometimes people, for health reasons, can't get vaccines, or the vaccine doesn't stick. So herd immunity is really important for public health and for saving lives. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the importance of herd immunity, because sometimes people are like, I just won't get this vaccine. It doesn't matter to anybody else. But it actually does matter to other people when we don't have herd immunity. And can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So vaccines are really important for individual health, for protecting you from getting an infection that can lead to serious disease. But because it protects you from getting disease, it also protects you from passing that along to other people. And that's the phenomenon that you referred to called herd immunity, that when we have enough people in a population who are protected from the infection, that kind of stops the chains of transmission that can happen. And it protects people who haven't been vaccinated, or it protects people who have gotten the vaccine but haven't mounted an immune response that allows them to be protected. And it especially protects like young individuals, young children who may not be old enough to receive the vaccine yet, or older individuals who may not have the kind of the robust immune response that we would hope.
So when you get a vaccine, you're not only potentially saving your own life, but you're potentially saving the new baby in your family's life, potentially saving the elderly parent's life. So it's really about more than one person, vaccines. And I always like to put that out there because a lot of people don't realize that. And that brings us into a project that you're doing right now, which is so important. It's a research and review about the HPV vaccine. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So with the Vaccine Integrity Project, one of the many things that we do is evidence reviews. And so our group is looking at the HPV vaccine. We're looking at the evidence for its effectiveness. So how well does it protect people who are vaccinated from those serious infections and cancers that HPV can cause. And then we're also looking at the safety of the vaccine to see what information is out there, what new information has been published in the past few years that would give us additional insight into the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine. We know that the HPV vaccine is safe from many, many years, from 25 years of the vaccine being used in populations. And we also know that it is effective. We've seen cervical cancer rates especially decline by 70, 80, 90% in populations that have high levels of vaccination. But we know that the HHS has recently changed the recommendations for the HPV vaccine. And so our group is looking at the evidence to say, is there any evidence and is there support for those changes, or is that something that we need to be concerned about?
What are you finding? Are you finding yes evidence? What's happening?
Good question. We are still conducting our systematic review. I would point folks to the Cochrane Review is a group out of the UK that does these systematic reviews that span decades. And they just published one at the end of last year that looked at safety and effectiveness. And they found that the vaccine is remarkably safe. And it is very, very effective. And so we're seeing what additional information was published in the past few years, but we aren't expecting that there will be kind of major changes in the data and in the science.
So it's been proven safe and effective, which is important. You know, you want a vaccine that is both safe and also effective, not one or the other. We need both and. Are there any other things that we're looking for in vaccines?
So with HPV vaccines specifically, is that what you're
in
referring
general,
to?
You know, we're looking for safety and effectiveness. Are we looking at any other measures about how to look at vaccines?
One of the things we look at with vaccines is how long does that protection last, or how durable is that protection? And we see an example of that is with flu or with COVID vaccines, that we've seen that they can be very effective for a short period of time, but you need to be revaccinated in order to maintain that protection. It appears that for something like HPV, that there is a long durability or a long window of time that you're protected after receiving the vaccine. And so that varies by each vaccine, and that's why you're recommended to receive boosters of different vaccines at different times based on how long that protection lasts.
That's important. So people should check their booster schedules, including for measles. Right now, measles is coming out. We just saw an outbreak, I believe, in one of the Disney areas or areas around Disney World or Disneyland. I'm not actually sure. It was a Disney area. So be sure that you check your measles vaccine and how often you need to get that boosted. Are there other vaccines that people should be testing for or checking for boosting?
I would recommend that people check their vaccination status. They can check that with their provider. Some states have registries that you can go and pull your vaccination status, and chat with your provider to make sure that you are up to date and that you're the most protected that you can be. Kind of flu, COVID, RSV, those respiratory diseases that we see coming back every year are the most common ones that people are not up to date on. But there are boosters for a number of vaccines that it's always good to check to make sure that you have that you're up to date.
What is your advice for people who are feeling a lot of hesitation about vaccines? What would you tell them, including the HPV vaccine, but vaccines generally?
Yeah, I would tell people that it's always good to ask questions if you are feeling concerned or nervous or anxious about getting a vaccine, that is perfectly normal. If you're concerned about shots or needles, or the potential reaction that you may have, all very, very normal. I would tell people that these vaccines are researched and they are monitored, many of them for decades, and they have been shown to be safe and effective. And that folks should talk with their providers to find out if the benefit outweighs the potential risk or some of those short-term side effects, or for people who may actually be at increased risk of severe side effects. Your doctor will be able to tell you that and to advise you whether or not to receive the vaccine. But overall, in general, vaccines that are licensed for use in the United States and that have been recommended for years are safe and effective for the general population.
And we've had generations of people, and lots of people already get them in the United States, which is just more data about the efficacy and the safety of them. And so I love what you said, and I want to uplift what you said. If you were wondering about vaccines, talk to your doctor. For your kids, talk to your pediatrician. For you, talk to your general practitioner or anybody who you have that's a regular doctor, because they have the scientific data. Right now, we have a situation where the Trump administration, HHS, Health and Human Services Department, under Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, last I looked, was negative 11% in the polls, are putting out non-data, non-science, and just kind of random chaos about vaccines in particular. So people who are trained in medicine, who are trained and are following the actual data, is who you should ask. And those people should also know about your health history. So there may be instances and times when it's not a good idea for you to get a vaccine. Your doctor will know that. So I just want to uplift what we just heard from Dr. Ulrich. When you're looking for information about vaccines, talk to your doctor and check in on what's important for you and your family. Do you have any other advice for people? We have about 2 minutes left to navigate health information in this really bizarre time where there's actually disinformation about health coming out from the Health and Human Services at the federal level under Donald Trump.
Yeah, it is a really, really challenging time for folks, and there is a lot of mis and disinformation coming out of the highest levels of our government. And so I would tell people that your doctor, nurse practitioners, your clinic is a good place to go for vaccine-related information. Your local and state health departments are really good places to go for information. And at the University of Minnesota, we have the Vaccine Integrity Project. We have a website that provides information about the safety and effectiveness of vaccines as well. So that would be an additional place that people could look.
How do they look for that? Because this is awesome. The Vaccine Integrity Project. Hello, thank you. With real scientific information. How do they find that?
You can Google Vaccine Integrity Project. I can share the link with you, and maybe you can share that with your listeners. Yeah, but that's on the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy, or CIDRAP, CIDRAP.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being on. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for saving lives. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to come back with a big organization called the Little Lobbyists. They're fantastic, and you're going to want to hear about them. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have one of my very favorite leaders on with us today. Hello. It's always good to have a bright spot in the middle of a swarm of bad headlines. We have Elena Hung, who's executive director and co-founder of the Little Lobbyists. Welcome, Elena.
Thank you. Thanks, Kristen. It's always good to be with you.
I love being with you. You bring so much hope. Okay, let's start with hope and change. Let's just start with hope and change. I know everybody is feeling including me, because when you look at the news, it is It's just, there's no words. That's all. It's just a noise of badness. And you, over time, have played such a pivotal role in moving forward proactive, positive policy change. And so I want to actually start with a moment of hope. And that is, you helped push through the Affordable Care Act, which right now, while it is in danger of having prices go up because of the Trump administration, yuck, covers tens of millions of people. And that was not easy. And then Republicans tried to overturn it more than 50 times, and you helped save it more than 50 times. So can you tell us a little bit about how you've moved forward policy, including the Affordable Care Act, and how does the Little Lobbyists be awesome? And listeners, everybody should become a member supporter of Little Lobbyists. Okay, you, Elena.
Thanks, Kristen. Well, number one, I say it's teamwork. It's all teamwork. We could not have done this ourselves. Working together with groups like Moms Rising and all of our other partner organizations. That's the only way to do it, to be in solidarity with one another. In terms of hope and joy, I mean, look at our children, right? This is why we're doing the work that we do. And for me personally, my daughter, Xiomara, she's the joy of my life. So I see what is possible with her. She was born with a number of serious medical conditions, and we just had some really scary moments with her. And she is thriving as a result of the Affordable Care Act, as a result of Medicaid, and children like her are thriving. And so I see what is possible, which means I also see what is at stake without it.
And when we're looking at what's possible, sometimes our members of Congress who, do not reflect, or dare I say, respect all of us yet. Right now, we don't have political parity. The majority of members of Congress are not moms. Many of them have not experienced being the main person dealing with health emergencies or health at all for their family, because they just don't reflect us yet. We've had Democrats standing up for healthcare time and time again. I do want to say that, where we've had Republicans trying to undermine healthcare time and time again. But one of the power of the Little Lobbyists, one of the many superpowers of the Little Lobbyists, is sharing the stories of what's at stake with people who sometimes are clueless. I feel like the Little Lobbyists are like a giant give a clue project to some Republicans who are like, wait, what? Our kids need healthcare? They've never dealt with it before. What are your thoughts on the many superpowers of the Little Lobbyists, including that one?
Well, the way we started was because we didn't see our story being told. This was, if you recall, the summer of 2017. It was the healthcare repeal fight. And we were watching the news along with everybody else. And I was like, where's our story? Who's talking about disabled children? Who's talking about Medicaid? And so we thought, well, if that story's going to be told, have it be told by the people who live it. And so families like mine started showing up and telling that story. And I was surprised. Now I look back on it, it's a little funny now, that people were shocked. People on the Hill staffers, members of Congress, the people responsible for writing our laws did not know. And so I was faced with two choices: either get angry or, okay, you need to be educated. I will educate you. Let the people who are directly affected be the ones doing the storytelling, doing the education. In a way, I don't really fault them. You can't know this life unless you live it. But you have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to learn. And so that's what I see in terms of our members of Congress, those who are willing to listen, willing to learn, and those who aren't, let's find you a new job, right? Let's vote you out.
Agree. And I think I want to talk a little bit about the power of story in a moment, but I also want to set the context for what is happening, or what's been happening in our nation's capital. When Moms Rising started, they did not know literally how to get a stroller through security. They had never experienced people trying to bring kids in strollers in groups into the Capitol building to meet with the members of Congress. What? Also, there weren't women's restrooms near the areas that people were doing legislative activities, like that our elected leaders were doing legislative activities. I mean, we're talking about massive catch-up needed in our nation's capital, and that is because we don't have parity yet of a congressional body that actually reflects our United States population, right? That's what we have to work on. To Elena's point, the people who don't see that, maybe we need to be replaced with somebody who does see what's happening with their constituents. And I'm not sure, did you also experience, I'm sure, some of that, like, they don't even know how to let us in the building at first. Like the first time was getting in the building, and that was even hard.
Oh, absolutely. And we did all of our Hill visits with our children. That was part of the storytelling, was that they could see disabled children, they could see medically complex children living joyful lives. So we would go through security with all of the medical equipment. At that time, my daughter Xiomara was still on the ventilator. So we had our ventilator, we had her oxygen tank, we had her medical bag, her emergency medical bag, her backup emergency medical bag, and so did all of the other families. And we did it. We did it. It wasn't easy, but we taught the security guards what to touch, what to not to touch, what to do, what to not to do. We guided our families. And like you said, we're building on the work that came before us. Somebody before us made it easier for strollers to go through, which then made it easier for wheelchairs to go through, which then made it easier for, the next families to go through. So really, we're all in this together. And I will say that I do owe a lot to the disability community for making so much accessible for our families on the Hill. I gotta say, disabled people are some of the most creative people I know, and whether by necessity or not, we got to keep building on that.
Yeah, building on the creativity to make sure that the voices of actual real people who are directly impacted are heard is really important, especially in a moment when there's a crackdown on our democratic participation. When we've had the President of the United States, President Trump, say that he would like to do away with the First Amendment, it is more important than ever for our stories and our voices to be heard. The amount of attacks that we're seeing on healthcare and other policies is unprecedented. We just had, and we've been talking about this in our shows, we just had a big, bad, horrible, awful, bad bill go through that cut an intense amount of funding for healthcare and put it in human rights abuses against immigrant families, and in really, really, really awful ways that we're seeing in the headlines every day. That is paid for by our cuts to our healthcare. And we don't need that. We need a compassionate, secure immigration policy. We don't need cuts to healthcare. We don't need whatever this cruelty is that's being implemented across our country. That's not what we need. So what's your advice to people? I've got so many advice questions for you. So I'm going to do a two-part, which you're not supposed to do. But A, about how to share your story, and B, about how to, kind of help save healthcare, which is honestly right now under increased threat in a way that I've never seen before.
Yeah. No, thanks, Kristen. And I appreciate the framing of that the money that is spent right now on ICE and on those who are terrorizing our communities, that's the money that they took from our healthcare. They took that from Medicaid. There's massive Medicaid cuts. So I need everybody to see that direct line from one to the other, right? That's money, that's our healthcare money that we're not receiving right now. And instead, our families in our communities are being terrorized on the streets. We're not safer. That's what I'm hearing from families across the country. We're not safer. Our caregivers, our nurses who take care of our disabled children do not feel safe going to work. And so when that's what we're looking at, and we're seeing children being detained, Kristen, you and I are moms. I mean, we don't have to be a mom to really feel this, but children are being 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds who are not a danger to themselves, not a danger to their communities. They're being detained. And so this is the moment when we ask, this is not who we want to be. We get to change the story, right? We get to write the story of our communities. And we don't want children being detained. We don't want our communities living in fear. And so when it comes to telling our stories, it's twofold for me. It's really about putting a face on the issue, right? These are real lives, real people that we all care about. And like you said at the top, so I'm going to circle it back. There's hope and joy in all of this. This is hard work. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. This work is hard. But we're all fighting for joy. We're all fighting for hope. That's what this is all about. At the end of the day, I still believe in democracy. I still believe in a country where we get to say what we feel and where we can feel safe and our disabled children can grow up and feel like they belong. So in terms of sharing your story, share it everywhere. And I'll be honest with you, when I first told my story publicly, I thought, okay, I'm done. I told my story one time, and that's not really it, friends. You have to keep telling your story over and over and over. And so that's what little lobbyist families do, whether it is writing an op-ed in the local paper, speaking at a rally, speaking at a protest, hosting a meeting in your community. The possibilities, the venues are endless. But what is important is to share the story, is to talk about how important Medicaid and healthcare is to yourself, to your families, to your community. I like to say, Little Lobbyists, we got on every stage we could. We grabbed every microphone we could find, got in front of every camera, wrote every word, had it published everywhere, all of the things. And just keep telling those stories.
And it makes a difference. I'm a
Yes.
witness. It makes a difference. The more than 50 attacks to try to overturn the ACA, at least one of them would have been successful without the stories and the voices of real people about how healthcare is important. And I can't believe we have to do this. I'm like outraged that we have to do this. We are one of the only countries in the world that doesn't have some form of access of universal healthcare. And might I remind everybody gets sick, Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, and everybody should have a chance to get better, right? So I can't believe we have to do this, but your story is so powerful, and you have a story because I'm sure you've gotten sick at one point or another and needed access to healthcare, whether it was for virus or needing stitches on your finger that you cut. It could be anything or something different than that. How can people support the Little Lobbyists? Where can they go to support?
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, and I want to just reiterate that everyone has a healthcare story. Mine is unique. My story may not be your story, and your story may not be mine. But we all have a healthcare story, and that's what unites us. The Little Lobbyists, we are everywhere. We are online. We are at www.littlelobbyist.org. We're on all of the social media platforms, Little Lobbyists. And we're starting our state chapter. So there are local in-person events. And you can find information on that on our website or on Facebook. So.
I love that. Love that. Love that. What's your dream for 2029? And I'm saying 2029 because I have some dreams for 2029. Also, I believe in us, and I also believe in persistence. What's your fast 2029 dream?
Oh my goodness, Kristen, I barely got through January, so try to think through 2029. At Little Lobbyists, we talk about fighting to survive and thrive. And we've been working on the survive for so long, just like you said, we're still fighting the same fight. I would love to work on the thrive part in 2029. Yes. I would love to talk about, going to national parks and community parks and have that be accessible. What are the things that we're fighting for? Because we have healthcare and we don't have to worry about that anymore. Yeah, let's work on the thrive part. I think that would be a good goal for us.
I love that too. We have healthcare for everyone. It is secure, it's affordable, and now we're working on the thrive part. I love that. I'll be there with you working on the thrive part. Right. Thank you so much, Elena, for all you do. Thank you for being on. Thank you for leading.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank you. Well, that's it for our show today. Thanks so much for tuning in as we tackle the top topics facing our nation in a way that requires the most boring disclaimer in the history of the planet Earth. Here goes. Views expressed on this show are those of the individual speakers and should not be attributed to Moms Rising, to this station, or to any news or social media service that may disseminate a recording of this show to the public or to any segment of the public. Boom! We'll catch you next week.